Members, it is nearly 6 o'clock. If I can ask everybody to get settled and we can introduce the Mayor. Members, could I ask you to take your seats, please? It is 6 o'clock.
Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Good evening, and thank you all for attending this meeting of the Council. And I also welcome any members of the public who may be viewing this meeting on YouTube. And before we begin, I want to address some housekeeping measures to make the meeting run as smoothly as possible, and to ask the Principal Democratic Services Officers to read a brief statement. Neil?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to clarify that the Council summons and reports for the meeting are available on the Council's website via the committee information pages. The Mayor will introduce each item on the agenda and will call speakers one by one. Please press the red speak button on the microphone in front of you should you wish to speak on an item. The Mayor shall call you in. If you are using your own device, please ensure that your camera and microphone are turned off, as they are not required. When matters are put to the vote, the Mayor shall ask for a show of hands, unless a name vote is requested. In attendance to support this meeting with any technical advice are the Council's Chief Executive, Dr. Helen Patterson, Executive Directors, the Council's Monitoring Officer, together with Principal Democratic Services Officers.
Next item is to elect a Mayor to preside, an officer to preside. If the Mayor and Deputy Mayor are not present, both are, so that's move up to item 2. Any apologies? I have apologies from Councillor Diane Coughlin, Councillor Angela Underhill. Are there any further apologies for tonight's meeting, please? Okay, anything else? Proceed to item 3.
Councillor Harris.
Can you all please use your mics, because I'm having difficulty hearing some of you. Okay, can I move on? Item 3, to approve the correct record and sign the minutes of the meeting held 10th of January 2022. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of January 2022, copies having been sent to each member of the Council, be approved as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
I was in attendance at that meeting and my presence hasn't been noted down.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bird. All those in favour, please show. Any against? That's carried. I move on to item 4, declaration of interest. can I call upon the monitoring officer to give some advice in relation to the budget item, please? Tony?
Yes, as a point of clarity for elected members, dispensations are granted to all elected members, so you can freely debate the budget item. In addition to that, I'd like to remind elected members that the budget debate requires a vote, so that will be a name vote, which is by legislation under the 2018 regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Have any members got any declaration of interest relevant to the meeting this evening?
Right on.
Councillor Murray. Thank you.
Declare an interest in item 11, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I move on to item 5, colleagues? Yes. Item 5, as there are no items to be considered in private session, I'll move on to item 6. It is with sadness that I refer to the death of Sir Richard Shepherd, former Member of Parliament for Aldridge and Brown Hills, 1979 to 2015. Do any members wish to speak in tribute to Sir Richard Shepherd? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very sad that we hear the passing of Richard, and very much like Bruce George, served this town exceptionally well over a number of years. I would say that Bruce was probably more towards Walsall than Richard Shepherd. He was Aldridge Brown Hills and therefore didn't have much affinity for Walsall or indeed Walsall Council. But he was a good orator. He was an exceptionally good parliamentarian, never really in favour of the late Margaret Thatcher. He had the whip removed from him. To be, the order of the day in some places. But at the end of the day, he stood his ground. He was very much a man of great principle. And as a result, as I said, he was a great orator in Parliament and respected for that. Not least of all, he was a very good constituency MP. Many people remember Richard with great affection. I wouldn't say I had a great working relationship with Richard, quite the opposite at times, I have to say. Hence, I moved from Streatley to Feasey with some help from others. But having said that, that looking back was perhaps not a bad thing. I've got two great colleagues I work with. But without doubt, when Richard was awarded his knighthood, it's not always that people who give exemplary service get recognised for it. And I think when I look back, that people like David Winnick and indeed Bruce George never received any recognition for that. Richard did. I don't think I've had any contact with him. I don't know whether any other member has since he left Aldridge Brown Hills, sold his house, and I wasn't aware, although I knew he wasn't well. It's very sad that people, when they have been at the pinnacle of their career, retire and then find themselves decline very quickly. That's very sad. I know that Richard originally came from Aberdeen, I think, but certainly was well accepted by the people of Aldridge Brown Hills and is still revered as a great MP. Sadly, like always, we have to get to the exit door sometime. Sadly, it's come to Richard at this point in time, but not at a long age, I have to say. I think Richard was 80, which in nowadays, is perhaps a young age to go. So I've got a bit yet. But I'd just like to pay tribute to Richard, who was a great servant for Aldridge Brown Hills and will be remembered for many years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Gary Perry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to echo the words of the leader, I also want to pay my own tribute to Sir Richard. There are few people these days who you can count on as someone who influences you when you choose to go into politics, whether that's at a national or local level. But Richard was one of those. I was very grateful for the support he gave me as a young Conservative in those days. And actually, if it wasn't for Richard, I don't think I'd be here. And that came about by chance because my family needed help at the time. And unfortunately, the local councillors of the day chose to put their backs against us. And it was only through our local MP and the support he gave my family as to why I'm standing here today, because he encouraged me and asked me to get involved locally as an activist. So I have a lot to be grateful to Sir Richard for that. And I always remember one of the first things he ever told me with the late, great Jim Salt, who was his agent, was to put your constituents first. And those of you who know me and know my team in Pelsall, we use the mantra Pelsall first. And I've always tried to follow that in everything that I do locally. There is a place for politics, but I always think that's best at a local level when you're serving your constituents. And that's something that Richard was really, really good at. He was never a Walsall MP. He was an MP for Aldridge Brownhills. We felt that there was more of an affinity with Staffordshire and Lichfield than there ever was with Walsall as a borough. But he was fiercely loyal to Aldridge Brownhills, as he was to his constituents. Never one to toe the party line. His loyalty, however, to the things he was passionate about, Brexit being one of them. And I think it was only a sad fact that as we achieved Brexit, that Richard's health had deteriorated to the point we didn't even realise we got there. And for a man who'd spent so much of his political life fighting for that end, it just seems sad that he didn't actually see the end goal come to fruition in the sense that he realised what was happening. So I'd like to pay tribute to Sir Richard and to his family. I have written to them. As you know, they have, but in recent years, his health did deteriorate. So we do owe Richard a lot. His service to Walsall should be rightly recognised, not just through the knighthood that he gained, for having Richard as its MP.
Thank you. Councillor John Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to agree with the words spoken by our leader and by Councillor Perry, and I would just like to add a few more myself. I actually moved to Aldridge as a very young man in March 1979. And one of the very first things that I did was to join the Aldridge Brownhills Conservative Association. I was immediately thrown into the general election campaign, and 2 months later, on the 3rd of May 1979, Richard Shepherd became the Member of Parliament for Aldridge Brownhills, which had previously been a Labour seat. Sir Richard went on to hold that seat for the next 36 years, winning 7 subsequent general elections. He was never defeated, but chose to step down in 2015. During those 36 years, I worked closely with Sir Richard and served a number of terms as his constituency chairman. He was knighted in 2013, New Year's Honours List, and everyone who was associated with Sir Richard was very proud that his service to the people had been recognised by the Queen in that way. Sir Richard was one of the finest parliamentarians of his generation. He was known as a libertarian and who believed in the sovereignty of Parliament above all else. He was a true believer in democracy and the ability to hold government to account. One thing which he said to me, which epitomised his beliefs, was, if you don't like what I do and how I represent you, John Murray, you can get rid of me at the ballot box and you can change things. But you can't get rid of those who sit in Brussels and enforce European laws upon our Parliament. And I think that sort of profound belief in parliamentary democracy, which is what made Sir Richard a leading Eurosceptic and at times a parliamentary rebel. A stance which caused him to have the Conservative Party whip removed on more than one occasion, most notably by voting against the Maastricht Treaty, the treaty which effectively created the European Union as we know it today. I consider it a privilege and an honour to have worked with and served Sir Richard Shepherd, and I feel truly blessed that he was part of almost my entire political life. He was a true gentleman, and he will be remembered with respect both locally and nationally. And my thoughts are with his brother John and his sister Davida, whom I met on many an occasion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Peter Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pay tribute to Richard Shepherd as well. I didn't meet Richard Shepherd on many occasions, but on the few occasions that I did meet him, I can actually see why he was so popular with the people of Aldridge Brown Hills. As a former Labour councillor many years ago, and more recently as a non-aligned councillor, what I admired about Richard Shepherd, and I think it's covering many of the points that Councillor Murray's just pointed out, is his principles and the fact that he was prepared to speak out and to vote according to his principles, even if that meant his no as being out of joint with the party that he represented at the time. It was independent thinking, and he, with retrospect, this is a personal view, did the right thing in opposing the Maastricht Treaty and supporting the move for Brexit, a move which I've always supported on the grounds of the democratic deficit that existed with Britain being part of the European Union. I think the last time I met Richard Shepherd was at the funeral of the late Councillor Tom Ansell. And I don't know why, but Richard Shepherd paid me a compliment when he made his speech at Tom's funeral. I think it was something that I'd said about Tom Ansell earlier. What it shows is that he wasn't one of these tribal party members that think that people that don't hold the same views as his party are somehow to be kept at a distance, not to be spoken to, etc. Richard Shepherd, I don't like the word gentleman, but I suppose the old-fashioned word gentleman probably does certainly apply to Richard Shepherd. And as has been said, he worked for Aldridge Brown Hills. We didn't often see him in the town centre, as Councillor Bird has said, but I'm sure he did his very best for the people of Aldridge Brown Hills. Although we see it as a safe Conservative seat anyway, in which case you might have thought he needn't have done very much, but he did. He worked hard for his constituents, and I'm sorry to hear of his death.
Thank you. Councillor Ashab Nawaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't know Sir Richard. I'm of that age where there were three big names in Walsall: Richard, David, and Bruce. And all I knew about him, about his reputation, and at that level, it was the three MPs that were so difficult to remove for the other party. But they were the three big names in Walsall, and I'd like to give my group's sincere condolences to his family and to the Conservative group, of course, because he was your MP. And it's MPs like that don't come around often, that have represented communities for a long, long time and have had the respect of communities like Bruce George and David Winnick. People who would locally vote for the Conservatives or for Labour would then switch in national elections because they got a real good service from the MP. So I would tribute our condolences to members opposite. And thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vera Waters, please. Thank you.
It was actually my father that knew Richard more than I did. I did actually meet Richard when my father passed. It was, he's up, my mum got in touch with the council at the Conservative office, and we received a phone call from his secretary saying he wanted to come to my father's funeral. So gave her the details, then she phoned me back and she said he wasn't able to come. He would get in touch with me, and I thought, yeah, of course he'll get in touch with me, but he did. He phoned me and he told me that it was the fact that he was actually, he's paired with, his opposite number was Mo Molan, and he got a meeting with Mo Molan. So that was why he couldn't come. And he said, excuse the pun, But I'm sure your father would understand that the show must go on. So that was Richard. That was Richard. And I've got a quote here from one of the local newspapers. He's nobody's yes man. I was sent to Westminster to do a job and not for voting fodder. And that was Richard. He was a man of the people and he looked after the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There being no further speakers, I move that this council have heard with deep regret the death of Sir Richard Shepherd, Member of Parliament, Brown Hills from 1979 to 2015. Place on record their appreciation of his services to the borough over a period of many years and expresses its condolences to his family this sad time. I'd like to call upon members and officers to stand in silence as a mark of respect and ask the clerk to confirm when a minute has elapsed. And I turn to item 7 to receive any petitions. Do any members have any petitions they would like to submit? I call upon Councillor Murray, and if there are any other members have any petitions. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a petition of over 1,000 signatures for a pedestrian crossing to be installed on Birmingham Road, Aldridge.
Now turn to item. I do apologise, Councillor Boff. My apologies.
It's a question on a petition, Madam Mayor. 3 months ago, I handed a petition in, not to full council, but to the curators. The curators passed it on to Constitutional Services. Constitutional Services passed it on to the director. I've had no response that that director has received that petition or any, whether he's dealt with that petition. It's totally unfair with the residents of Dorset Road are having this misery with this parking, and it's utterly disgraceful when a director can't respond back to an elected member.
And members. I've been assured by the Chief Executive that that will be followed up, Councillor Paul. Okay, thank you. Can I now move on to item 8, questions? I call upon Councillor Peter Smith to ask his first question with regard to Academization. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. This question is to Councillor Toe. With regard to the academisation of Walsall local authority run schools, to what extent do you agree with the following 5 points? 1, that there is no evidence that standards have risen just because the school has become an academy. Indeed, there is evidence that standards have fallen in several cases in Walsall following the school becoming an academy. 1. Point 2, that academization is about taking parents out of the picture with no requirement for parent governors with the academies run by non-elected, mainly unaccountable businessmen and women. Point 3, that academization is not about boosting achievement, but about dismantling national pay scales for teachers and recruiting unqualified staff. And number 4, that the Academy's programme places huge power in the hands of the Education Secretary in Whitehall, while mainly severing schools' links with democratically elected local authorities. And finally, 5, that the former Ofsted Chief Sir Michael Wilshaw was correct when he criticised 7 sizable academy chains for failing to improve the results of too many pupils in their schools while paying board members large salaries. That's the question, Councillor Toe.
Councillor Toe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, Councillor Smith, I've been saying publicly for a number of years that I have concerns with the government's push to make all schools academies, to take away the responsibility for running schools from our local council. I believe, as they are Walsall children, the responsibility for the performance of schools should be in the hands of Walsall Council and not in academy trusts, many of which are based well outside our borough. If there is an issue or an area of concern within the academy, our senior education team have to take the matter up with the Department of Education Regional Schools Commissioner, who is currently based in Coventry, with the hope it is dealt with appropriately. This is in contrast to the direct access we currently have with our maintained schools. On your first point, you have asked, the evidence in Walsall shows it's not proven that academisation is working or that the education of our children and young people has improved. In general, we have not seen the same rate of improvement in academies as we have seen in Walsall Council's maintained schools. To make my point, those schools that were good or outstanding and were able to convert to an academy without recourse to Walsall Council now stand at 81%. As the figure would have been 100% at the time of them converting to an academy, this is a drop of 90% and a gap of 7.9% to the national figure of 88.9%. The data also showed us becoming academy does not necessarily mean improvements in outcomes. For example, Walsall Local Authority primary and secondary schools currently outperform the national figure for good or outstanding schools. When you look at the academy picture, it is varied, with academy converted to a primary and sponsor-led secondary also outperforming national, but sponsor-led primary academies and converted secondary academies underperform against national. For your information, there's been research papers into this area with differing outcomes and with no definitive answer. For example, in 2017, the Educational Policy Institute, the EPI, published a paper examining the impact of academies on national outcomes. The comprehensive report brings together EPI's own analysis along with research undertaken by the London School of Economics. Their principal finding through this extended study is that academies do not provide an automatic solution to school improvement, as they demonstrate throughout the reports that there is a significant variation in performance of different types of academies and multi-academy trusts. On point 2, from my knowledge, there are local governing bodies in some Walsall academies, but they won't have the same decision-making authority for delegated powers as governing bodies in Walsall maintained schools do, which I believe is not appropriate. Again, for your information, the Department of Education states it wants parents to be more involved in their child's education, not less. As we have many, and as we know, we have many parents do have the skills to be effective governors in this town. From my experience, governing bodies in Walsall Council maintained schools generally do appoint their trustees for their skills, insight and knowledge that they bring to the school. That said, all academy boards are and will continue to be free to appoint to their boards as they see fit. The Department of Education do, though, want to see academies to move away from the model where people are elected or appointed to governing bodies for means of representation, to one of which they are chosen or to one to which they are chosen for their expertise. This means academy trust boards should appoint all their trustees for their skills, insight and knowledge rather than who they represent, possibly meaning councillors. Question 3, I will answer that in 2 parts. First to mention, I've been informed national pay scales were removed a number of years ago. Every year the teachers' pay and conditions document sets out our minimum and maximum values for their various ranges of pay. In this year's annual document, they included advisory pay ranges for the main pay range, upper pay range, and unqualified range. But schools do not have to adhere to them as they are advisory. We are not aware, though, of any academies moving away from the statutory pay and conditions document. On the other point, academies are not restricted to only appoint. On your other point, academies are not restricted to only appoint qualified teachers. However, academies still have to ensure education standards are maintained. The recruitment teams in Walsall Council have not observed any increase in the appointment of unqualified staff in academies. In fact, over the past few years, such appointments have been to an absolute minimum. I've got your question 4, or point 4. Whilst the DfE wants to see every school in the country being part of a family of schools in a stronger academy trust, I believe there are other types of school partnerships that can be effective. For example, federations, of which we have a number in Walsall, but are still council-maintained schools. The key principle being there is a shared accountability for standards across their family of schools, and all the schools support each other. The Academies programme aims to give individual schools greater freedoms compared to local authority control. Being an academy gives them the power to decide on the best curriculum for their pupils and setting term dates and school hours, etc. As with council-maintained schools, academies are state-funded schools, and how they are budgeted and for how they budget are independent from Walsall local authority. Multi-academy trusts have the responsibility for running a number of academies as charities, and as charities they cannot be run for financial profit, and any surplus must be reinvested into the trust. The freedom academies enjoy being outside the control of the local authority does not mean they are not regulated. The Department for Education National Regional Schools Commissioner and their teams, together with the Education and Skills Funding Agency, provide education and financial oversight on all academy trusts. And individual academies are still subject to Ofsted inspections and ratings, exactly the same way as council-run schools are. If an academy is failing to meet the required standards, the current system allows for the Department of Education to take action, including transferring the academy to a more suitable trust where appropriate. We do, of course, have conversation with the Regional Schools Commissioner when a concern is raised around the performance of any academy in Walsall. And your 5th point, the former Ofsted Chief, Sir Michael Winchester, Wilshaw, made criticisms that were quoted in 2016. And clearly things have moved on with those 7 changes in those last 6 years. Although I finally would say, I do wonder what Sir Michael would have to say about the Academization of schools. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Smith, I believe you've got a second question this time with regard to democratic accountability.
Chair,
Question, please.
with respect, can I ask a supplementary question of Councillor?
No. Can we carry on with the next? He's entitled to a supplementary. My apologies. Thank you. Councillor Smith, you're entitled to a supplementary.
Yes, I know. Thank you. I'd like to ask Councillor Tow whether he agrees with me that any criticism of academisation, which, you know, we both share, it seems, is in no way a criticism of the professional and hard work that the vast majority of school teachers and school staff carry out in those academies.
Councillor
Agree with that. Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor.
We now move on to your second question, please, Councillor Smith. Hold on a minute, please, Councillor Smith. Councillor Toke, are you in a position to respond?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I thought you were speaking to me. I stood up. I thought you were speaking. I totally agree with you. There is no criticism, clearly, of the staff and of schools currently in academies, and it was something I was going to make in an initial statement. But of course, the problem is for schools, they are subject to decisions taken by what Academy trust boards, which maybe sometimes they would not be in favour of. So it is a difficult situation. I think sometimes schools are in with the trust change that there are out there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Toe. Can I move on to your second question now, please, Councillor Smith?
Thank you. Question to the appropriate portfolio holder. Given that in recent years, Walsall Council tax has gone up year after year under Conservative and Labour-run administrations, with Walsall paying one of the highest, if not the highest rate, in the Black Country in the West Midlands, with a seemingly never-ending double whammy of increases in council tax and cuts to services, mainly due to central government cuts to local council grants, which in Walsall's case amounts to over £106 million since 2011. And further, given that at least some councillors present today have borne witness to the following points. Borne witness to Walsall Council losing control of its housing stock, with 99% of rented properties now in the hands of separate housing associations or private landlords. Borne witness to Walsall Council losing control of its care homes for our elderly and vulnerable, with once again the private sector turning them into better money spinners than boarding houses in Blackpool. Borne witness to Walsall Council losing control over its schools and colleges, with democratically unaccountable academy trusts taking over most of them. Borne witness to Walsall Council losing control of much of its resources, with, for example, approximately 11.4 million going to the undemocratic West Midlands Combined Authority. I think that, can I withdraw that last bit, because I think that's a mistake. I think that last bit has been taken out. I'm reading from my big print because I can't see the small print, and I think that last point I've made was taken out, the actual thing, so forget that last point. Walsall Council losing many of its libraries, community associations and centres, youth clubs and sure start centres as funding has been pulled. Borne witness to the move to more token representation on public bodies like the Fire Authority and the Police Authority, towards which council taxpayers contribute. Borne witness to resources being channeled to regional mayors and commissioners that may well have gone to local councils previously. And borne witness to the demise of local councillor influence and public involvement, as well as the watering down of democratic accountability, with such moves as the closure of neighbourhood offices, the removal of area planning committees, and the move from a committee structure to a cabinet structure, to name but a few. Such moves misleadingly sugar-coated with claims of efficiency and smarter working. So, given all of the above, my question is, to what extent do you fear, as I do, that it's only a matter of time before the last vestiges of local democratic accountability are removed, and where local metropolitan district councils such as Walsall will disappear, unless systems are changed to maximise public involvement in the decision-making process, so that people will feel a sense of ownership and hence support, rather than feeling a sense of detachment and disconnect, and thus inadvertently facilitating the demise of local government as we know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Bird to answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just thank Councillor Smith for taking us down the road of all our yesterdays, and just perhaps put a bit of reasoning onto the table. Do I believe that democracy is getting worse? No, I don't. I think in actual fact, the Local Government Act in 2010, which was introduced by a Labour government, then imposed us a cabinet system. And that cabinet system is only as good as the cabinet itself and the people who scrutinise those cabinet decisions. Housing stock, yes, I was here when the housing stock was transferred. Best thing we ever did. We were the worst landlords ever. We couldn't get repairs done. We couldn't afford to do anything that would satisfy our tenants. So it was right and proper. I was the leader of the day, I think, when the first tranche went through. And then the Labour Party took over for a very short space of time and transferred the remaining stock to the betterment of the tenants. Quality of their housing was improved, and WHG and Accord made sure that we had homes that were fit to live in. Yes, I was here when the care homes were transferred out. And the reason for that was quite simple. We hadn't got the money to put them back into a state of good repair because of the neglect this council had had over many, many years. Not, I would add, for the Conservative administration. That was when we had an administration which Councillor Smith, in actual fact, was part of. The third one was neighbourhood offices. Well, there's a joke. I remember those days too. And I'll quote from the Labour manifesto: "We shall not hesitate to discriminate against areas that do not return Labour councillors, and will only appoint officers akin with our philosophy," which then meant that the government of the day had to act, the Labour government, and they said, right, tell you what we'll do. We'll introduce a situation where officers of the council are politically restricted. And I think Councillor Smith was attendance at the meeting where he and the remainder of his colleagues were expelled from the Labour Party because of the actions that were being taken up in this town. Furthermore, this council, like any other, has to assess priorities, and our priorities are quite clear. They're set in our council plan, which we'll be debating later on this evening. And as a result, it asks every individual, resident and elected member. Sadly, but some elected members are very lazy, here included. And as a result, they don't get involved. And as a result, they then criticise when things don't go the way they want. Neighbourhood offices. Well, I remember the time when one neighbourhood officer, who actually served locally, he was asked, "What's your job then?" "I'm a milkman." "Oh, you a member of the Labour Party?" "Yeah." "OK, how'd you like to be a neighbourhood officer?" And he was. He was. And that was just one of the 20 that we had. The first one to close was that in Streetley, and I'm glad to say I was instrumental in doing that. That individual, who was very much an activist within the Labour Party, lived in Palfrey. Palfrey, yes, I think he did. Palfrey or Elves. But at the end of the day, the services of this council came to be an embarrassing situation. We had 20 mini town halls, and as a result, that was, certainly at the time, was seen to be a way forward. Sadly, it proved to be the demise of local democracy because it was interfered with by the officers that were appointed by the then Labour group. Do I believe democracy is in the decline? Only if we allow it to be. Only if we allow the sectarian divides that we see, not here, but elsewhere across the country. People getting elected for self-interest rather than for the benefit of the people. When I was elected in 1980, somebody said to me, and I've said this before, Henry O'Hare, he pointed to the Labour benches and he said, "You see that lot over there?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You think they're your enemies, don't you?" I said, "I do." He pointed to the Conservatives, said, "They're all over here." By Christ, was he right. As a result, I have to tell you, democracy is you only get out of democracy what you put in. I, like Sir Richard Shepherd, am a firm believer of democracy. That's therefore why I stand here, as I do, and argue sometimes about the Constitution that we have, which governs the way things work in this council. It is the Constitution that says what we can and can't do, and it's the money that says what services we can provide. It may be that in other parts of the country, they are doing things and charging for them. Well, there's a four-letter word that I don't like, and I've actually stood on this many, many times. It's called free. We are not an organisation that continue to provide things free. We are facilitators rather than providers. And that's where local government has changed. And over the last few years, during the Proud programme, which has been a huge success, we have saved millions and millions of pounds of waste. That's what it was, waste. Because we now put that into doing services more proactively, more efficiently, and to the benefit of our residents. That's why we are elected here. We are elected to represent the people, and that is what democracy is all about. Sadly, there are those that tinker about with it and try and gerrymander it. Well, gerrymander it if you will, but you will pay the price in the ballot box or before.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary?
Madam Mayor, I'm certainly not defending the blatant appointment of officers and staff solely due to their political affiliation. So if that did happen in the past, then with hindsight, in my view, that wasn't the correct thing to do. I was making a general point about decentralising services to where the people can get to them. At the moment, there's nowhere in this borough of Walsall where members of the public can go physically and talk to the council about their issues or problems. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But my question to Councillor Bird, supplementary, is do you not accept that there is, in my view, light at the end of the tunnel, because there are some excellent examples of community involvement which can be built on, and I think is being built on, due to the work of the portfolio for Older for Resilient Communities and his department. I've seen some excellent work of community involvement and attempts to further that, and I think that this could be if you like, the foundation stones of something much better. Do you agree with that, Councillor Bird?
Councillor Bird.
And as a result, I think the pandemic has shown us how the community can come together. I've lived in my row for 23 years, and who do I know? The next door neighbour, that's about it. That's the way many areas in the country, Walsall is no exception. As a result, the community associations do exceptional work, which is one of the reasons why I was proud to appoint Councillor Gary Perry as a second deputy, something that's perhaps not been done in many areas. It does exist because of the work he'd done and continued. He needed to have the authority to cross boundaries within the silos that this council used to operate in and does in other parts of the country. And to do that, it meant bringing that model forward. And as I said earlier, we are facilitators, not providers. And there are some community associations that may be running at a loss. But I look at that loss and I say, how much would it cost us to look after the people those community associations have found during the pandemic? The 2,000 people that were isolated that we didn't know about. And as a result, I think that CAs are money well spent. And I will continue to support that with Walsall for All and our CAs going forward. And I'm glad to say I applaud you and actually support you in your commendation of the department that my colleague Councillor Perry heads up as portfolio holder.
Thank you, Councillor Smith and Councillor Bird. Now move on, please. Councillor Worrell, you have a question to ask.
Madam Mayor. The proposed household waste recycling centre, HWRC, at Middlemore Lane, Aldridge, is an excellent forward-looking project. However, there is a considerable local concern at the expected significantly increased volumes of vehicular traffic, including HGVs, on the local road network to and from the site, including residential areas of Aldridge, Rushall and Sheffield. Can you advise me whether, as part of the HWRC project, mitigating effective traffic calming / road safety / speed reduction measures on feeder routes through nearby residential areas are included? And if so, what they are, and specifically whether anything is proposed in the Westgate Barnes Lane 20 mph zone where the existing limit is widely ignored, and along Spring Road, New Street, Sheffield.
Thank you, Councillor Worrell. Over to you, Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Worrell, for asking the question, as Councillor Waters did on the 16th of December last year. I agree that the proposed scheme would be an excellent new facility for our residents. As you know, a planning application has been submitted and is currently open for public consultation. If the issues are raised as part of the consultation, they will be considered as part of the planning application process. I can confirm that the application includes a comprehensive transport statement that covers the impact of traffic that would be generated by the new facility and recognises the traffic that was developed in accordance with the current planning approval. It should be noted that some of the traffic to the new site will be using the same roads as the traffic currently going to the Merchants Way site, which would close. In terms of the specific asks on Westgate and Barnes Lane and on Spring Road and New Street, I'm sure officers can give you a much more detailed response in terms of what exactly is going to be happening on those roads, if anything.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Worrell, do you have a supplementary question to ask?
Yeah. I mean, actually, Adrian, the issue is whether for any road safety schemes, we've got sufficient resources, basically because of decade plus of cuts in funding. We haven't. You know that and I know that. So really what I need to understand, and particularly the people out there in the ward I represent, but also in affected areas of Aldridge Central and South, do need to know whether what is going to be put in place will be effective in mitigating the extra traffic going to and from the site. So could I please have some assurance that we will get something effective? Because if it isn't effective, not much use to have, is it?
Thank you. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In terms of funding for road safety schemes, watch this space with the Highways Capital Programme being published very shortly. And in terms of actual mitigation, we will make sure that the roads are safe around that area. It's currently an industrial estate, and in the transport plan and the transport statement for the planning application, it will very much be determined which route these vehicles will follow.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew and Councillor Worrell. Now I move on to agenda item 9, which is Mayoralty for 2022-23. I shall now call for nominations for the position of Mayor and Deputy Mayor-elect for the 2022-23 municipal year. Councillor Bird, is it? Yes, Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I formally move that the position of Mayor-elect be nominated as Councillor Rose Martin, and for the Deputy Mayor-elect, Councillor Chris Toe, for the year 22-23. And in doing so, reserve any speeches for the point in time when those appointments are made next year. This year.
Been moved and seconded. Thank you both. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Carried. Thank you. I declare that Councillor Rose Martin be nominated as Mayor and Councillor Chris Toe be nominated as Deputy Mayor. Walsall Metropolitan Borough Council for the 2022-23 municipal year. Thank you. Can I move on to item 10 on the agenda, annual audit report? And I call upon Councillor Johal to move the recommendation of audit committee, please.
Thank you. Dear Madam Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to present the annual audit report to full council. I would like to put on record gratitude and thanks of this council to Mr. Green, the independent chair, and the work of the audit committee. I formally move the report.
That's seconded. Thank you. Councillor Johal, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, that-
Do any members wish to speak? Oh. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may make one or two comments on this. I confirm that the various recommendations in the report have been accepted by the finance team. One of the points made in the report is that the need to retain members who have some audit knowledge. Trying to challenge it as a layperson is very difficult, but essential if we can probe the accounts and discharge our responsibility to the public. There's not many people coming forward to join the audit committee, issue a training with members of the audit committee, sharing the sort of questions with those on audit committees in other councils might be a way forward. I think an audit for the use of the transformation fund would be a helpful way forward to make sure that that money is being spent with value for money. And we had a meeting of the audit committee, in fact, last night. Progress of the PROUD programme is one issue where I think all councillors should have an update on the progress, which should be clear to all members. The offer of regular briefing might increase the level of questioning received. The use of the Better Care Fund, which is a big chunk of the money, again, an audit of the spend, not the actual policy part, would be another check where a major source of funding, and I think that would be accepted. The other problem was raised, especially last night, about the problem of fraud. Apparently there is about £2 billion worth of fraud in local government over the country, and maybe up to 36.5 million of hidden fraud. I think it's something where we should have zero tolerance and ensure that we are all very much aware of where money might be disappearing down into that black hole. So I do hope that we take that point on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Any other speakers? Councillor Johal, do you wish to say anything after that question? Issues raised by Councillor Robertson?
We all agreed, so.
Right. Can we have a show of hands then? All those in favour of the report, please show. Any against? Carried. Now move to item 11, recommendation of Personnel Committee, Pay Policy and Living Wage. I call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendations of the Personnel Committee. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report has been circulated. It's self-explanatory. I'll just move it as set out.
Do any members wish to speak on the motion or what's before you? I have to have a show of hands at the moment because there's something wrong with the screen. So anybody, do apologise. Councillor Andrew, you had your hand up. Sorry. Right, all those in favour then? Carried. Thank you. Bear with us a moment, please. Technical hitch, they call it, I think. Okay, I've been told I can carry on. Item 12A, my apologies, but item 12A, recommendation of Cabinet relating to our council plan. Once again, now I'll call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendation of Cabinet, please. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the report has again once more been circulated and appears on CMIS, but what this does do, it shows our council plan going forward to the year 2040. What this does indicate to all members and indeed to members of the public that the ways of working that they have seen in the past now have to change. Living with COVID is a phrase that we should get used to. It hasn't gone away and it won't go away. So therefore we have to adopt our practices and working practices to accommodate the threats from that virus. The council plan also sets out the points of interest and measures of success. And that is to prove to members that the council plan is being implemented and in actual fact is being validated at every opportunity. As the pandemic remains ongoing, we continue to learn how to live with it and impact the council has in continuing with its work. It is fortunate the investment we made in technology has seen the council function from a service point of view at a level unprecedented by using digital means. As a result, we will continue to monitor our progress, and I would point out the demographics for page 3 of this our Warsaw report. And indeed, I would ask Council to endorse the Cabinet's recommendations appearing in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Andrew. Any other members wish to speak?
Just on a point of, well, not a point of order, it's clarification if you could. Are we speaking on the whole of item 12 on the agenda or just item 12A at the minute? Just 12A, is it?
Yes, it is.
Did move that it would be 12A.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. In which case, I don't wish to speak on 12A.
I'm having problems here at the end, so can we? Ask again, 12A we're on. Are there anybody wishing to speak? If so, please show you. Councillor Aftab-Nawaz, my apologies, I'm having problems with technology.
No, you don't have to apologise to me, Madam Mayor. My ego's not that big, I'm afraid. But thank you for the presentation of the Warsaw plan. And some points of it, you know, we would agree because of the pandemic, things have had to change. But of course, that is your plan, and we were in power, we would have a different plan. We accept that the administration has its plan for some of the points, like I say, the technological points, the use of technology to services. But we would, of course, have a different emphasis on that. The administration sets the plan, and you are the administration, so it's the administration we would have our plan. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Adrian Andrew. No? Okay. Councillor no. Everybody's gone off now, right? Technology's all right when it works, isn't it? Thank you. Can I move to a vote now? All those in favour of the item, please show. Any to the contrary? That's carried. We now move on to agenda item 12B. First of all, I call upon, sorry, I nearly upgraded you. Anthony Cox to advise members, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to remind all elected members, you have a dispensation so you can fully debate the motion or any potential amendments if any are put forward. And again, to remind you, under the 2014 regulations, in relation to the motion and also in relation to if there are any amendments put forward, all will require a named vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Now call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendation of Cabinet relating to the Corporate Board Budget Plan and Treasury Management Investment Strategy as set out in the Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unlike me, I will refer to notes because this is quite a complicated piece of notes of motion, in as much that it obviously is setting the council tax for the forthcoming financial year. The report in itself is quite extensive, but I think that it is fair to say that we have to understand that the council tax being proposed is, as agreed in the appendix. You will see that bands A to D will see an increase of between 10p and 15 pence per day, the council tax. And I think that's a very relevant figure. Some people out there believe that the majority of the council tax, if not all, funds the services that this council provides. That is not true. Our budget is balanced for the year 22-23, and we are investing significantly in frontline services, caring for our young, elderly and vulnerable residents, with total revenue investment of £34.7 million in the year 22-23. To ensure we continue to invest in those priority services, we have identified £18.9 million of efficiency savings, which proposes a council tax increase of 2.99%. We are committed to delivering our transformation programme to improve our customers' experience as they contact us for support and advice, and investing in capital infrastructure with additional capital investment of £187 million in the year 22-23. In respect of the report in front of you tonight, we must set legally a balanced budget. Our core government grant, known as our settlement, does not provide us with sufficient funding to cover all of our costs, as I alluded to a few minutes ago. And by identifying the package of £18.9 million of savings, our programme is on target with organisational change aimed at improving our customer and staff experiences by implementing new, more efficient and customer-focused ways of working. This in turn will drive out efficiencies and savings, and further indicative savings of £6.9 million have been identified for the year 23-24, and further savings in 24-25 of £1.15 million. I refer to the fact that the council tax does not, as people might think, cover all of our services. Our gross expenditure for 22-23 is £704 million, which is approximately 57% of that is funded from government grants and only 20% from council tax. The remainder is from business rates, sales, fees and charges. We all know that during the pandemic, income has been depleted by way of the most obvious one is that of leisure and that of car parking, both of which have seen less patronage as we would want. As a result of the above, we will set a balanced budget, as I've said, for 22-23, but we will be spending £8 million on creating an environment where businesses invest and everyone who wants a job can access one. £233 million on education, which includes training and skills to enable children and adults to fulfil their personal development. A further £210 million on people to live a good quality of life and feel that they belong. £21 million on helping people have make people healthy and be encouraged to get support when they need it. As I said earlier to a question, we are facilitators and not providers in many services. £4 million to support children to thrive emotionally, physically, mentally, and feel that they too are achieving their full potential, and furthermore, to feel safe. £59 million is on supporting children to grow up in connected communities and feel they feel safe everywhere. £5 million on supporting housing needs, and a further £55 million to ensure that people are proud of their town, districts and communities. We also have capital investment of 187 million for 22-23 and a further 172 million for the following 3 years. So over 359 million of capital investment over the next 4 years. 80 million are council funded schemes, 176 over 4 years, and 107 million externally funded. Schemes including the draft capital programme are deemed necessary to support our council plan and the priorities that we have set out. Full details of those schemes are contained in the reports and documentation that are freely available to all elected members. I have to say at this point, and it's right to do so, you can't do this job without a good finance team. I'm very proud to say that the finance team, headed up by Deborah Heinsohn, has in actual fact produced a result that in all the years I've been here is unprecedented. To have a balanced budget going forward for the next 3 years, having saved hundreds of millions through the PROUD programme, and for those that were here when that PROUD programme started, we gave PwC a commitment. We'll pay you the agreed contract rate. For every pound we pay you, we want to see a £3 return. Now that was working well till we got the pandemic. And it's fair to say now, if you look back over those averages, it's probably £1 paid to them and £2.50 being our savings going forward. That's just not 1 year, that's year on year. It is, I have to admit, not good that governments, successive governments, have taken over 100 million out of the budget of this council and others around the country. For those that we argue is being disproportionate in certain parts of that country. And I put my hand up to that and say, yeah, that's true. But you can only work with what you've got. And when you've got a finite amount of money, as every householder has in Walsall, then you have to cut your cloth accordingly. Question offered by Councillor Smith earlier was, how come ours is the highest council tax, or one of the highest council tax? And I say this quite honestly and openly, because we do provide a lot more services than some. It's great to hear that the investment made in children's services for the first time in over 40 years has seen a result which gives us good from an Ofsted. It's great to hear that the money that we put in to resilient communities now gets us into a situation where we know where the need is and we provide that need. It's also great to hear that our highway structure, apart from Transport for West Midlands, I seem to want to dig everything up, quite genuinely is accepted as in good order. It's also fair to say that we have an exceptional team of officers who have made sure through this pandemic that our residents have come first. And in actual fact, we are proud of that. We're now going with a policy of Walsall first. The money that the administration, through government grant, which was I think about £58 million, was given to help Walsall businesses survive. We are making sure now that the Walsall pound, wherever possible, and within the law, is spent in those very businesses for council services that we ask from outside providers. There is no silver bullet for children in care, but we all know that's a very big ticket item. And in some cases, a child in care can cost us up to and more than £3,000 a week. So when we compare ourselves to other councils around the country, I think we have to look inwardly to see how well we provide the services that we offer. Those services are multifaceted. I think at one time somebody told me we produced, I think, 16 or 17,000 different services per day. There's always going to be the moan that the council are wasting money here and there. So I ask you, identify it. That's what we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years through the PROUD programme. I'm proud to say this budget tonight is, without doubt, well thought out, well reasoned, with the support of both council officers and the administration that I'm pleased to represent on the Conservative side. I've had great support from my members, and therefore I commend the budget to you this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Afternoz.
Madam Mayor, first of all, and importantly, I'd like to thank Deborah and the team, Vicky and the team, who also helped our position in putting forward a response. And I thank the leader for his speech. Madam Mayor, the budget set out here today continues to put a greater burden on the residents of Walsall. In the past 10 to 12 years, we have seen huge cuts to core funding to Walsall by the Conservative government, impacting on services provided to our residents in Walsall. Since 2010, the Conservative-led or the Conservative governments have cut approximately £105 million from Walsall. Our most vulnerable adults and children and all our directorates have felt the brunt of cuts from an uncaring Conservative government. Local people are also being asked to pay more and more every year, with council tax now making up almost 20% of the total budget. In 2013-14, council tax only made up 14% of the total budget. Local people being asked for more and more and getting less and less. Madam Mayor, we also see a lot of one-off funding in this year's budget. Future years' funding is therefore a real concern. With an unpredictable government and an unpredictable situation created by the government, the future does not seem bright here in Walsall. Madam Mayor, people across Walsall in every ward, young and old, single people, families, are suffering from a cost of living crisis. In many cases, it's a catastrophe for our most vulnerable. This budget does not do enough to help tackle these immediate and tragic issues facing our residents in Walsall. I accept that a council is limited on how much it can do, particularly when faced with an out-of-touch government that parties whilst our residents suffer. But we should do as much as we can, and certainly more than offered in this budget. The cost of gas, the cost of electric, food and other basics is rising exponentially. People will be faced with the awful choice of heating or eating. The suffering that is happening and that will get worse shames our country, and we can and must, as a country and a council, do more to help our most vulnerable in society and in our borough. Madam Mayor, the removal of the £20 uplift on universal credit was a blatantly cruel move by the government and has led to more suffering. I and others around this hall will have been approached by residents who are really suffering with the cost of living. In recognising this, Madam Mayor, I wish to move an amendment to the budget, and I ask Democratic Services officers to distribute the amendment. I'll read out the.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain.
I'll read out the amendment if you would bear with me, Madam Mayor. The proposal is to create a £1 million cost of living crisis fund for 22-23, financed by an additional investment of £500,000 from general reserves and incorporating the existing £500,000 crisis support scheme budget. I seek the leader's assurance that should this amendment be accepted, it will be used as stated to support Walsall's most vulnerable residents at a time when the cost of living is increasing exponentially. So I move that recommendation 3.3.1 of the report as submitted be amended as follows, noting that this amendment would require a change to the statutory determinations within the council resolution, increasing both gross expenditure and gross income by 500,000 as follows. Section 3.3.1 Revenue, paragraph E. The following statutory determinations, references are to the Local Government Finance Act 1992 as amended, and subject to any final changes arising from receipt of final specific grant allocations and technical legislative guidance. Number one, £704,484,510 being the aggregate gross expenditure which the Council estimates for the items set out in Section 31A, paragraph 2, subparagraphs A to F of the Act, and number 2, 566,059,260 pounds being the aggregate income which the council estimates for the items set out in section 31A, paragraph 3, subparagraph A to D of the Act. Additionally, it would increase the cash limit for customer engagement by 500,000 and increase use of reserves by 500,000 for 22-23, only within section B, part 1, the Revenue Corporate Budget Plan and Capital Programme. And to note, there is no impact on other sections of the recommendations in 3.3.1 or on the recommendations in 3.3.2 and 3.3.3. Madam Mayor, talking to the amendment. The amendment creating a cost of living crisis fund of £1 million will help our most vulnerable residents. Our struggling families need the support, and this fund will help them. Of course, more is needed, and this government can do a lot more, but chooses not to, and allows the suffering to go on. The amendment, although not enough by far, will, if accepted, help our most vulnerable residents. We have a choice tonight, Madam Mayor, to support our vulnerable by supporting the Labour amendment, or a choice to do the right thing to help our residents. Supporting this amendment will not, for the Conservative group, impact on their main budget proposals, nor will it create further cuts. It is therefore an amendment that can be and should be supported. To help or not to help is the question. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain, I believe you're seconding. Thank you.
Yeah, agreeing with Councillor Nawaz. We've got a serious cost of living crisis and it's getting worse. For people in Warsaw, now it's difficult circumstances. Year in, year out, there have been cuts from this local government imposed by the central government. In the last 12 years, there's been 105 million cuts that have had devastating effects in our communities. What this amendment is asking for is that additional £500,000 is added to already to the cost of living crisis fund that this administration is putting out. So what we're asking for is a one-off £500,000 additional amount to add it to this to help people who are suffering from cost of living. National insurance increasing in April, gas and electric increasing by 65% in the next few weeks. Fuel prices have increased dramatically. You see rising food prices. On top of that, you've seen universal credit card. You've seen people's income being affected. So we need to make a choice here. Are we on the side of people and residents of Warsaw, or are we going to just cruelly stand by and do nothing? The central government in the last 12 years has cut our budget dramatically and very ruthlessly and cruelly. And they're doing it again. This budget you're presenting on the opposite side is 20 million plus cuts, 8.7 million in social care, 4.7 million in children's services. This is going to have a real impact on people and their quality of life. And we can't support that. What we're saying, this amendment will help people, will support people's life a little bit better. So I commend this amendment to you.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, as this amendment has been moved and seconded and circulated, do you need an adjournment at all?
Oh, no. No. I don't need an adjournment. What I do know is the Labour group needs some education on finance. 52 weeks ago, we set a budget for this year. Since then, we've been working on the budget for the forthcoming year. It's gone through every scrutiny committee, of which Councillor Nawaz, Councillor Hussain sits on, and they said absolutely nothing. Their access,
That's incorrect. Point of order, Madam Mayor. We have scrutinized policies and the budget in social care and health, and we did not accept the proposals. That's incorrect.
Can I be clear,
Councillor
saying
Bird,
that's
want
not
to
actually a
carry
point
on?
of order. It
Not a
could be
point of order, but then again, he hasn't read the book.
It could be a
The
point
fact
of
of the matter is
clarification.
this, that if the Labour group had thought they had the expertise to do so, they could have put forward an alternative budget. No, they seek to put some minor thing on the table that will give them the political soundbite that they think that the press will pick up. Well, the answer is, again, understanding of the finance is clear. There is a crisis fund which they identify within their amendment. And there is also a provision, the way this council works, is if that crisis fund proves not to be enough, then the cabinet can revisit that. And we then can make a decision, either A, under the delegated authority of the Chief Finance Officer, up to the limits, to via that amount from general reserves, or to have a report to cabinet advising them of the shortfall, and therefore we as the administration and we as the cabinet can make that decision to top up that fund. Whether that be $500,000, whether it be $1 million, whatever we have, but we have to make sure that the reserves themselves are not compromised. It's disappointing that even at this late stage, at whatever time it is, that clock right, 7:30 on the eve of making a budget, somebody wakes up in the Labour group and says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to put an amendment down so that we can get the moral high ground and we can get that soundbite. We're there helping the poor and the people who are affected. Let me tell you now, it's everybody that's suffering from the rising fuel. Whatever your financial bank balance might be, it is everybody that's affected by the price in food. At the moment, I think we should be concentrating what the aggression we're seeing in Russia and Ukraine might bring further down onto communities like ours in Warsaw. £500,000 is a drop in the ocean with the amount of money that we have to spend. But let me tell you now, one of the priorities which you miss within the budget is the help that we actually are putting forward to the very people you wish to purport to represent. And in actual fact, if you look at the way the council tax reduction scheme has been addressed to help those very people who are on low income, you'll find that in the notes, you'll find it in the papers if you have time to look. Every document that I have seen, every document that my cabinet members have seen, every document that my elected members in the Conservative Party have seen has been available to you. Have you looked at them? Yeah. Have you given fair scrutiny? I would say no. What I will say is this, that this is without doubt tokenism. It is so that the Labour administration over there could in actual fact go out to the public and say, well, we tried to look after you. Well, I'm sorry, you should have started that almost a year ago as we did. Madam Mayor, I have to say, this group not be supporting you. I do not need an adjournment because I have to say, I think it is a very much a poor amendment, to say the least. We have an uncaring Conservative government. Councillor Sain says, I think. No, it wasn't. It was Councillor Nawaz. And future funding is unpredictable. That's correct. And that's why we put the budget we have. We've got a balanced budget for this year. And going forward, we have a balanced budget for 3 years. And we do that by accepting the fact that whatever the government might be, whether it's a Conservative government or, God forbid, a Labour government in the future, we're not going to get any more money. If you believe that any incoming government's going to hand out money to local authorities, it ain't. Because the amount of money that's been given by this government and has been used to support businesses and indeed residents of this borough and elsewhere in the country has to be recovered. And let me tell you now, there won't be a begging bowl going round, and there won't be anybody in this borough that will fall foul of being not able to put food on the table to their children, which is what you would like to say. There is a crisis fund and it's administered correctly. If that crisis fund were to be depleted to such an extent, I will give you now a public commitment. It will be replenished, and I don't need some stupid amendment copied up tonight just to get a soundbite to think that that will get headlines. It won't.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Robertson. Councillor Robertson, I've called. He's got his lights on.
Thank you very
Councillor
much.
Smith.
Chair, I find some of the comments that Councillor Bird has made to be frankly quite insulting to the Labour group. I mean, you know, we really do care about the people we represent. The main issue facing the more vulnerable residents in Walsall is the issue of the intense pressure on their individual and family budgets, pressure on their energy bills, increased national insurance contributions, increasing food prices, and a rise in the need for food banks. We now have 2,500 food banks nationwide, which are the ones that we actually know about. There are many, many other unofficial groups. On top of that, we have a potential 7% rise in inflation rates, and much more, you know, with the events that are happening in Ukraine, driving families here in Walsall into poverty and children living in poverty. Also, the £20 cut in universal credit. In this crisis, when a funding needed will be administered by Money Home Jobs to ensure that the money is targeted to those in need. So we do need that extra support for a cost of living crisis fund. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't support this amendment, this Labour amendment, because if I do, I'll be voting for £18.6 million worth of cuts and a 2.99% rise in the council tax. That's why I can't support the amendment. Can I say that there's probably no one more competent and experienced at being able to present a budget in this council chamber than Councillor Bird, and I defer to his experience and knowledge on this. I'm a mere sort of backbench amateur compared, but I would like to make one or 2 points because I don't think Labour's amendment does very much at all. Everyone that's come to me so far as a councillor in terms of hardship have been helped. There's pots and pots of money out there, and admittedly, this 500,000 would add to the pot, but there's pots of money out there. The unfortunate thing is, it's people having the pride to say that they need it and to ring someone up. But the money, there is money there. I'm not saying there's enough to meet everybody's needs if they all rang together. But, you know, what Councillor Nawaz has put forward is basically asking the council taxpayers, saying, yeah, 18.6 million, that's all right again. It's a ritual now every year, whether it's Labour or Conservative, we see this double whammy of council tax rises and cuts in services. As I understand it, and Councillor Bird, I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, the government has given this council £20 million extra this year compared to last year. As I understand it, this council, the budget that has been proposed, plans to actually have something like £16.1 million in general reserves and 172.5 million in earmark reserves. Now, the council could still claim to be acting prudently, in my opinion, if it decided not to raise council tax this year. It could still follow its MTFF, its medium-term financial forecast, page 235 of the report. If it set a range of reserves between 1% and 2.5%. Now, the council tax will bring the council about £4 million in extra revenue. I think that £4 million in extra revenue could be found by taking £4 million out of the £16 million of general reserves. We would still then be acting within financial guidance. We would still be acting, I would argue, prudently. A 1.7% of gross budget of 704 million would translate into a retention of general reserves of approximately 12 million. Now that's comfortably within the 1 to 2.5 range that we're supposed to follow in terms of financial prudence. So it is possible, never mind about £500,000, it is possible to take £4 million out of reserves without it affecting the stability and the, you know, the common sense of balanced budgets and all that, but still leave £12 million in reserves. And that £4 million taken out would cover the cost of a 2.99% council tax. Every household would then get some benefit, every household in the borough. It is true, as Councillor Nawaz has said, and we all know, the cost of living is going up, food's going up, fuel's going up. Inflation's at its record level for many, many years. This issue in the Ukraine could well result in further costs in transport and further costs in food prices, which will come back to our economy as well. Councillor Bird quite rightly said that it amounts to only 10p a day. People don't think in terms of how much a day is it things costing. They think in terms of weekly bills, or more increasingly their monthly bills. And it's not so much this on its own, it's this added on to everything else that's adding another £5 a month, or £6 a month, £8 a month, £10 a month. That's the problem. So it's probably too late now, but I think I certainly wouldn't support the Labour amendment, because I can't vote for any budget that involves cuts, big millions of pounds worth of cuts to services, and the double whammy of council tax rises. I never have, and I never will. And I just wonder whether, given all the problems that we've got financially in our community, whether the best way would be this year as a one-off, in the hope that things get better next year and beyond, we couldn't take £4 million out of reserves and still leave 12 million, well above the 1% minimum that we recommended to keep as reserves. Take £4 million and say to the council taxpayers of Walsall, we're going to use some of these reserves, keep your council tax as it is for the next 12 months.
Councillor Smith, thank you. Final speaker in this debate, Councillor Adrian Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the leader said, the Conservative group won't be supporting this amendment, but we might have had another 20 grand to play with had we not had a abortive by-election, but we'll pass swiftly on over that. I think we need to be, the Labour group particularly, need to be reminded that the government have issued out the Household Support Fund and also have recently announced the £150 council tax energy rebate, which will help 92% of households in this borough. Using the same premise, if we were to agree to this £1 million, £150 from that would help 6,600 people, and I'm sorry, less than 92% of the people of this borough. The Labour's amendment this evening is certainly for the few and not the many.
Thank you. Can I now call upon Tony Cox to take a named vote on the amendment, please?
Amendments. Councillor Bird.
Against.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Burley. Councillor Allen.
Against.
Councillor Andrew. Councillor Bashir.
For.
Councillor C. Bott, Councillor P. Bott, Councillor Butler, Councillor Chatter, Councillor Clark,
Against.
Councillor Cooper, Councillor Craddock,
Against.
Councillor Creaney, Councillor Ditter,
For.
Councillor Elson,
Against.
Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Flint, Councillor Follows,
Against.
Councillor Gandam,
Against.
Councillor Gultasib, Councillor Harrison,
Against.
Councillor Hickin,
Against.
Councillor A. Hussain,
Against.
Councillor K. Hussain,
For.
Councillor James,
Against.
Councillor Jevons,
For.
Councillor Johal,
Against.
Councillor Kaur,
Against.
Councillor Lee,
Against.
Councillor Martin, Councillor Mazar,
For.
Councillor Murphy,
Against.
Councillor Murray,
Against.
Councillor Nasreen,
For.
Councillor A.S. Nazir,
For.
Councillor M. Nazir, Councillor M. Nazir, Councillor Pedley,
Against.
Councillor Perry, Councillor Rattigan, Councillor Robertson,
For.
Councillor Samra,
Against.
Councillor Sears, Councillor Singh Sohal, Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor C. Statham, Councillor M. Statham,
Against.
Councillor Toe,
Against.
Councillor Waters,
Against.
Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Wilson,
Against.
Councillor Worrell, Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Has asked me if I'll announce the result of the vote on the amendment to agenda item 12B. The amendment is defeated with 14 votes for and 35 against. What happens now is we go back to the originating motion. Anyone who has spoken already on the originating motion cannot now speak, should not now speak. Apart from the mover of the motion, Councillor Bird, who is allowed a right of reply.
And if one's spoken on the amendment that's just been dealt with, it is possible, if the mayor calls you, to speak on the, the original notice of motion, is it not? Can't hear.
Councillor Smith, to reiterate what I said, if you have already spoken on the originating motion, you cannot speak on it because that's what we're back to, the originating motion. You spoke on the amendments to the originating motion, therefore you've not spoken on the originating motion. Therefore, you can speak, if you so choose, on the originating motion.
Had nobody indicating they wish to speak, and I was going to move to the vote. Apologies. Thank you. Councillor Jevons, I do apologise. I didn't see your name up there. I do apologise.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Don't worry. When I hit 40, I lost my IT abilities. I know it's difficult up there. Okay, so just listening to the debate and the usual bluff and bluster from the leader of the council as to why he wouldn't support the amendments, which puzzles me a little bit because he goes on to say one voice, £500,000 is not a lot of money actually in the scheme of things, but if we're going to need to help people, we'll do it. So we put this forward tonight as a practical measure and to address, well, address what Councillor Smith was trying to say. On the one hand, he's saying I can't vote for it. On the other one, he wants to take £4 million out of reserves. And then he don't want to put council tax up at all. But one of the reasons that we have suffered financially in Walsall is because over the years, and it was some time ago now, I grant you, previous Conservative administrations didn't put the council tax up, which meant that the next year we were on a lower council tax base to apply that to, and that caused problems. Yeah, but one of the things I want to address, because, okay, I do understand what you're saying about cuts, and since 2010, and there's not a lot I can do about it in here, to be honest. Since 2010, people need to understand this, that our grant to council has been slashed from the central government. And Councillor Bird was quite correct in saying that your council tax doesn't pay for all the services, and there's thousands of services out there that the council provides. We don't just sweep the streets or empty your bin. Well, of course, we do that. What happens then is because our council tax rises were capped, services had to be cut. So you were paying more for less. And that's the equation that people face. And whilst looking at this budget and it's balanced, okay, I grant you that. We produced a balanced budget, you produced one. It's difficult to do. I understand it's difficult to do. And there's investment in there, and I've said before, and you said before, Councillor Bird, that budgets are a package. And I do welcome the continued investment in education, children's in particular, and in various things in clean and green, but certainly the Councillor Perry's initiative on getting the volunteers involved, great. Certainly cannot fault that. But when you live in places such as Stevenson Square or around Stevenson Square in Beechdale, when antisocial behaviour is going through the roof because the number of police, and we don't control the number of police, is reduced. But we used to have a really good system of working with the police and CCTV and so on. And we managed to eradicate ASB at one point, pretty much totally in Stevenson Square. And now people out there are living in fear. Buses are regularly taken off through Beechdale because they're now getting attacked. We used to work really well together in partnership, but I feel that things around the edges that we took for granted have gone. We're still providing some great services, but the whole thing about this and the Proud programme is some services are gold, some services are silver, and some are bronze. Now, we would have a change in emphasis maybe on services. We used to be able to provide these, now we cannot. And if you are living in places like this that I've just mentioned, like Stevenson Square or in Beechdale, you've seen, yes, a cut in police, which we don't control. You've seen a cut in the people who, from the council, who dealt with ASB and noise. But you've also seen a cut in the youth services that provided distractions to get kids off the street and mentoring. And it's these soft things that really do make up a community that we've lost. Now, okay, I mean, we had to apply cuts when we were in power too. But I cannot vote for this budget tonight, not because I don't think it's necessarily a good or a bad budget, because this has got to end from government. And the only way I can protest is by doing this, by voting against it. And that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regards to the increase in council tax, just a point of clarification, really. The West Midlands Fire Police and Crime Commissioner has an increase of 5.63, and the Fire and Rescue of 7.9. Is that included in the figure, the overall figure that's the council tax, please?
Councillor Kizar Hussain.
The record, it wasn't done overnight or in the morning, Mike. We worked with the finance officer quite significantly for a long time, and it was well thought out amendment, and we were given good service and good advice from the finance officer. So I'd like to give credit to the finance team again, like my colleague stated. Your view and your thoughts, I think, are a bit cruel, to put it mildly, about that there was no opposition to the budget on scrutiny panels. You asked people on social care, we had discussion, we had a debate, and there was a vote, and we lost the vote on there on the proposal on social care proposal. So that's incorrect again, Mike. And coming back on you got 19 million of cuts that are imposed by central government. And I agree with Lee here. The only way I can protest against these cuts is to vote against this budget. Because if I vote for this budget, then I'm agreeing to the cuts by the central government. And the only way I can show my opposition to this is by speaking against this budget and the proposal you got out today. At £500,000 additional on the crisis fund will help people when you are voting against it. So I can't support this budget.
Councillor Gary Perry.
I wasn't going to speak, but I feel the need, in the sense that you would think we've done nothing in the last 18 months, 2 years, and operated in the most difficult circumstances ever to have hit not just this council, this country, but internationally as well. I don't agree that the leader performs bluff and bluster. As Councillor Jevons said, I think the leader is on the money when it comes to the way he administers governance in this authority. We talk about support for those in need. I know what that looks like because I have had personal experience of what's been delivered at a local level in this last 2 years. Not just from the government aid that we got to help us through the pandemic. Let's not forget the millions of pounds this council has been given to support businesses, to support schools, to support communities in need, that we passported through our resilient community model to those genuinely in need on the front line. And what we also managed to do at the same time was to get intelligence we didn't reach before, by knowing where those individuals were who are on the cusp of vulnerability. And that has been a huge effort by this administration, but also by the voluntary sector here in Walsall, which has never been as strong either. Our community associations have been name-checked a few times this evening. They've never also been in a stronger position. We've learnt the lessons of pull-free because we actually worked with our sector to understand it and also to make sure it was in a strong position to help us going forward. I can list the support that is available because it is my team, supported by those who work in Councillor Andrews' portfolio, that actually are dealing with some of the vulnerabilities that our residents come forward with. So yes, there was this £500,000 crisis fund, something I have to say in a couple of budgets back under the Labour administration they were going to cut, as they were in terms of the council tax reduction scheme. You were also going to cut that, if I remember correctly, Councillor Bird. But £2.8 million has been given to us just this last 6 months through the Household Support Fund, which we've passported again, with direct payments to individual residents, and particularly supporting parents with vulnerable children. The council tax reduction scheme still exists. The holiday activity fund still operates and again is delivered well through our resilient communities model. The crisis fund still stands, and as the leader said, we can ask for more money if required, and no doubts about it, I would be the first who would be knocking the door if our communities were not getting what they needed in terms of support. Notwithstanding the discretionary offers that we offer through housing support, through our work with Walsall Housing Group, and then all the other funds and charitable additional monies that we get into the borough. So it might not seem that the £500,000 has been supported by this administration, but we actually know how to access additional support when it is required. I also want to share, Madam Mayor, my own praise for the way that the council has stood up during this difficult period, and will go on to. We know that the cost of living is something that our residents, through the Housing Support Fund, through community associations, again, particularly in the run-up to Christmas and beyond, I myself seen at first hand how that scheme has been administered. People quietly coming forward, whether it was to purchase white goods because they hadn't got the money to open washing machine, or it was the individual, a flat I actually went with our community association to, where I saw a lady who was shielding because she was vulnerable from COVID. She had a child who got sadly had cancer, and she was having to dry her washing on radiators. And she said to me, I don't mind paying the bill, it's having an effect what I can do in terms of food and everything else that I can offer my child. And all she asked for was a dryer. That came from this fund. Something small, but would make a big difference to that individual. And we saw countless other examples of that and continue to do it. I stand by the fact that the information that we gathered through the last 2 years, information I don't think we'd have ever had the chance to do so before, has put us in good stead to support those genuinely needing our borough. And I would be the first to step up if anyone come forward and challenged me on what we were doing in terms of the help that is there to be offered. That is why I think it's all credit to the leader, it is credit to the administration, the way it has not only got this borough through its darkest times, but the focus now is on the future. Let's start talking this town up. Our economic opportunities, the opportunities for our schools. Who would have thought we'd have had a good Ofsted? I remember the years when we always used to talk about getting taken over our education services. That hasn't just happened, but it happens because of investment. And people forget what money has been given to this council. Leisure services, you know, that's in my portfolio again. We were on the cusp of using the income that we were getting from 2 of our leading leisure centres to invest more in local services. And we've been given direct pound for pound from the money we've lost through the closures that happened because of the pandemic. Where's that come from? Ultimately, somebody else has to pay. We cannot live in a world where we keep giving and not being aware of what living within our means also actually tells us. So I commend this budget. I commend the hard work of the leader and the finance team, and they're sitting up there now because it must be difficult. Every 5 minutes, you're given another diktat from government. I'll spend this and minister that. Get in touch with money your own job, give that to businesses, and you're all running around yourself trying to do that and your day job and run a council. And we should be proud of that.
Councillor Keith Headley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've also had reference tonight by members opposite about cuts, and especially reference into adult social care. I'd like to place on record that we don't stand by cuts, we stand by cost savings versus efficiency, because when we look at that in terms of scrutiny from the Adult Social Care Board, could we please ask members to look at the outcome base of what we are putting for residents within our care, especially with adult social care. The easy option is to keep forward plowing money without looking at the effect it is having on the residents. Technology has moved forward. We've got the advance within single-handed care, assisted living technology, which means our residents are experiencing a better quality of care, better outcomes for better value of money. So they are not badged of cuts, and I feel we need to put on record that we are looking at better, more efficient ways of working that will empower our residents to live more independent with better outcomes. So let's concentrate on the quality of the outcomes for the resident, not on what the opposition would badge as cuts.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. Without repeating a lot of what I said earlier on the amendment, I can't support this budget, even though I recognise the hard work that's gone into it. I recognise the competence of the people who've put it forward. I can't support it because, and by the way, can I say that the one thing I found about this council, although it's Conservative controlled, which isn't a natural kind of bent for me, I found them not to be politically ideological and doctrinaire. I found them to be very fair across the board. And I will say that for the administration that's running this town at the minute. They've got to be at least 10 times better than the opposition, if ever they, in their present state, had the chance to take control. If ever the regional office of the Labour Party take them out of special measures. But the reason I can't vote for this budget is because, again, we've got millions of pounds worth of cuts, and I do call them cuts. I make no apology for calling them cuts, because if you're going to call them savings, you could use savings to put into services elsewhere. But if you're saving money on the one hand, but then not putting it elsewhere, it's a cut in my view. Now, one thing that I do agree with Councillor Bird on earlier on, he says, don't expect any more money off the government. And I think he's right. You know why? Because the government have seen councils dip into their pockets year after year after year after year and find millions of pounds worth of money to cut services. And so long as they keep doing that, the government, of course, won't give them any more money. It's time, in my view, and I can't do it as one individual councillor. If I've got a group of 19 or 20 or a few more behind me, I might be able to shout a bit louder and have a bit more of an effect. But what it needs is for councils across this country to stand up and say to the government, enough's enough, we're taking no more cuts. And if councils behaved in a kind of unified way, and I know it's difficult for Conservative councils to do that if they've got a Conservative government, I know that, and vice versa. But if the councils got together and said, right, we're having no more of this, they'd have to have a rethink. But year after year, councils roll over on their belly while the government tickles their belly like a cocker spaniel, knowing full well that councils across the country, whether Conservative or Labour, will do as they're told, not kick up a fuss, dig and find a few more million, which makes one wonder why we've got so much money in the first place. If we can keep finding £18 million a year every year, or thereabouts for about the last 10 years, it makes you wonder why we've got all that money in the first place. So I can't support this budget. I will not support a budget that gives the double whammy to the residents of this borough of not only cuts in services, but a council tax rise in the bargain.
Councillor Tim Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it's been no surprise to everybody here that I support this budget and I support the efficiency savings. Councillor Hussain talked about scrutiny and how scrutiny's had its opportunity. There were no budget recommendations for children's services in scrutiny, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Pedley talked about outcomes. Let's look at outcomes. Let's look at children's services. It's been mentioned twice or three times before. We are delivering with what we've got, and we should be proud of that. And let's also reflect back, and I use children's services as the example. When has children's services ever gone overspent and the council has said no? We prioritise our children in Walsall. If we overspend the budget because we have to, that's what we do in Walsall, and that's irrespective of who's in administration. Councillor Perry talked about this £500,000 fund which we're not going to support, because if the fund in place runs out, we will top it up. And I'm with Councillor Perry. If one of my members of my community comes forward and needs it, I will be calling at the leader's door to to say, let's top the fund up. So let's be proud of what we're doing. Let's move forward together. We're delivering the outcomes for the people that we represent, and we need to get over it and vote for this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Bird, right of reply.
Oh, yes. Can I just say that Councillor Smith, first of all, yes, it would be nice to think that we could take £4 million out of reserves, and that would only keep us sitting where we are for this 12 months. But it would mean that going forward, the situation is getting worse. Plus the fact I'm confident I would get a tap on the shoulder from the 151 officer saying, hey, I don't think I like this much. And so therefore, he or she of the day, the 151 officer, is he or she that must be obeyed. And as a result, I don't think I want to incur the wrath of the incumbent 151 officer, and so therefore I will decline that offer. I come back to cuts and savings. Well, the Labour Party could have made a contribution by not calling the by-election in Plec, which cost this council £20,000. You forgot that. When I went round to Plec, and I repeat what I said, one of the biggest problems we have in this council is almost £1 million that we have to spend on fly tipping. Where do we find a lot of that? The Plec. So I think you need to have an education programme with some of your residents or Plec councillors to show them that tipping rubbish and fly tipping in general in that area is totally unacceptable. Therefore, you'd have your £500,000 by educating your residents that it's not acceptable. Yes, Councillor Jevons, you refer to the fact that some years ago, Conservative administration decided not only to cap or stop the council tax, but reduce it. That was me. I did that. I regretted it ever since, because the government of the day then introduced capping, which was nowhere on the radar, and therefore we had lowered our council tax base. And as a result, we've been playing catch up ever since. You refer to the fact of the ASB in the Beachdale. Perhaps you can ask your youngsters to watch TikTok. Mine has some horrifying videos on there, you know. Some horrifying videos. It turns them to crime rather than actually turns them away from it. I come back to my colleague, Councillor Ferguson. The short answer to the question is, Ken, no. Our council tax increase does not include the Labour increase of £10 per head from the police commissioner. It does not include the 7.9% by the Labour Fire Authority. So don't come here crying crocodile tears when your lot down there, of which we have little or no control, are throwing bombs over the fence, and then we're getting the blame. Because on top of the 2.99%, you will see that increase from the fire service and the police. It is also fair to say that if you examine the budget, Councillor Jevons, which you may not have done, obviously there's others haven't, but you might not have done, there is an investment in CCTV, which my colleague has championed for the last number of years, and it is now being put into all those areas that you yourself are saying are areas and hotspots for crime and ASB. Well, I have to say that when I look at this, I look around the opposition, although there's probably only 50% of you here now. The rest of them have got bored and gone home. But our lot here show commitment. The commitment is shown by the budget you've got tonight, not just by me, but by every member of the Conservative group. And yes, could we have done it without the finance team? No. We hold their hands or they hold mine, I don't know. I'm fortunate that I get the kudos for producing the budget. But that's not true. It's the team up there and the team down here, and they're the unsung heroes of this. You know, we still operate the policy in Warsaw, which I like. It's old-fashioned, but it goes like this. Officers make recommendations, elected members make decisions. It is old-fashioned, but it stood the test of time. So we put our policies forward, and our officers then say how we can do it. Sometimes they grab me by the throat and you can't do that. And I think, okay, but what can be invented can be circumvented. That's the policy I've always operated to. The budget tonight is a very fair and honest budget, and it comes as a balanced budget because of the efficiency savings we have made. I remember going back some years, and Pete Smith was here then, when we actually issued mobile phones to half a dozen members of the council. I think I was one. And it was all uproar. Good grief. How could you honestly think of that? But every one of you here has got a laptop. Every one of you here has got a mobile phone, because that's the way this council works. It's efficient. It works with digital and indeed technology that allows you to do your job and hopefully will become more efficient for your residents to enable us to contact the services of the council. Going forward, I think all of us would accept my granddaughter's 12. She knows more about technology than many of us in this room. And as those youngsters come through the ranks, they will accept the fact that the services that we are providing as facilitators, not really providers, will come through digital access and digital access to the services such as, and I've said this, I hope it'll come to fruition, you go into McDonald's, you see a little totem pole, right? You've been on a few times by the look of it, Lee. You press a button and it says, I'll have a Big Mac. You press a button, it says, I'll have a strawberry milkshake. You press another button and all of a sudden you say, put your card in here. The youngsters are used to that. Fortunately, we have to make provision for the old people like me who I do enhance technology. I made my money selling it, so I should do. But there are people out there that don't do technology. What we have to do is to make sure that the provision is there for them. This budget does that. It shows how we can help all of the people of Walsall, whatever their level of intelligence, and there are multiplicity of opportunities for people to get involved. And I think you should all be proud, and some of you actually contributed to packing those food parcels at the Sneed. Politics apart, how many of you would have done that years ago? Because we didn't know where the recipients lived. We found that out. And that database we've got now provides us with opportunities not to actually give the services. Some people ask for it. Well, why do you want that then? Oh, because it's free. Why are you going to use it? Oh, no, I'll never use it, but it's free. So you've got to have it. I'm sorry, that's not the way this council works. From here on in and going forward, no doubt when I'm not here, you will continue that journey, a journey which started a long time ago. And as a result, I think the renaissance of the community associations is something that we should embrace through the resilient communities model, which I have to remind you, you opposed. You probably don't remember that. I do. Might not be good at some things, figures, but I'm bloody good at a memory, and I can remember when you said no. And as a result, there was great opposition by some members, some that aren't here anymore, perhaps, but they opposed the resilient communities model. We proved it works. And I think every individual member should pay tribute to the officer team that I have worked with through this pandemic. And I have been, at times, Patterson and I speak sometimes Sunday nights, every Sunday night. And during the pandemic, it was regularly, daily, when things were really horrific. But now, instead of throwing brickbats at each other, let's embrace the budget we've got and work with the communities we represent. And one of the biggest things going forward, and I say this again, fly tipping is the scourge of this council. £1 million. You wouldn't need your amendment here. You wouldn't need your amendment here. What we want to do is to enlighten the people out there that reporting fly tippers is not only good for the area, it is a civic duty. It is a criminal offence. And the quicker we get those people off the street, the happier I will be. So I thank you for your indulgence this evening.
Thank you. Now move to the vote, and I'm going to ask Tony Cox to undertake the name vote from the result at the end of that vote. It has to be recorded. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We are voting on the substantive motion of agenda item 12B. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
Against.
Councillor Burley. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Andrew.
For.
Councillor Bashir.
Against.
Councillor C. Bott. Councillor P. Bott. Councillor Butler, Councillor Chatter, Councillor Clark, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Craddock, 4, Councillor Creaney, Councillor Ditter, Councillor Elson,
4,
Councillor Ferguson,
4,
Councillor Flint, Councillor Follows,
4,
Councillor Gandam,
4,
Councillor Gultasib,
Against.
Councillor Harrison,
4,
Councillor Hickin,
4,
Councillor A. Hussain,
4,
Councillor K. Hussain,
against,
Councillor James,
4,
Councillor Jevons,
Against.
Councillor Johal,
4.
Councillor Kaur,
4,
Councillor Lee,
4,
Councillor Martin, Councillor Mazar,
against,
Councillor Murphy,
4,
Councillor Murray, 4, Councillor Nazreen,
Against.
Councillor A.S. Nazir,
against,
Councillor M. Nazir, Councillor Pedley,
4,
Councillor Perry, Councillor Rattigan, Councillor Robertson,
Against.
Councillor Samra,
4,
Councillor Sears,
4,
Councillor Singh Sohal, Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor C. Statham, Councillor M. Statham,
4,
Councillor Toe, 4, Councillor Waters,
4.
Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Wilson,
4,
Councillor Worrell, Councillor Young. At the request of Madam Mayor, I'll read the results. The substantive motion is carried with 34 votes for and 15 against with no abstentions. Thank you.
we now move on to agenda item 13. And I call upon Councillor Wilson to present his report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm sure, Madam Mayor, that members have read the report, pages 300 to 304, so I'm not intending to go through it in detail. It'll be no surprise again for members here. Children's services for me is clearly the priority of this council and probably every council in the country. There are some points that I wish to mention, Madam Mayor, and it'd be remiss of me not to start with some thank yous. So I have a quick list of thank yous, starting with our amazing and hard-working staff, the unsung heroes who have worked relentlessly before and during the pandemic, and as we learn to live with COVID coming out the other side. And this includes all of our staff in children's services. So whether it's the admin teams, the social workers, and our leaders, thank you. Moving on to the next thank you is our children, young people, families, carers and advocates. They've continued to work with us, Madam Mayor, and it's important that Children's Services in Walsall works with them too. The next thank you has to go to the leader and my fellow cabinet members. Your support has been amazing and greatly appreciated, so thank you. Thank you to the Chief Exec and the senior leadership team. You've worked with Children's Services to help us deliver the Walsall Right for Children transformation programme. Thank you to our partners. Everything we do in Children's Services is partnership working. So I just want to say we appreciate your support and couldn't do what we do without our partners. And the last one is to all the elected members. Thank you for everything you do for children in Walsall. It is the responsibility to protect the children of all of us, not just those who work in Children's Services. So moving on to Ofsted and the great report that we had. So last October, we had an Ofsted inspection and received a good rating. That is an amazing achievement in Children's Services in Walsall, never seen before and something we should be proud of. This validates the work that we're doing with an external inspection, but clearly we're not complacent and we know there's a lot of work to do, but we're on the right track. Moving on to our Walsall Right for Children transformation programme. This ensures that our children and young people receive the right help at the right time, for as long as they need that help. The work has been positively recognised by the Ofsted report. Moving on to having the voices of our children and young people at the centre of what we do, and that is working well. The report mentions the big conversation, but we've also got the voices of our young people in our interview processes within Children's Services, as well as in our corporate parenting board, Children in Care Council and the Care Leavers Group, just to name a few. Madam Mayor, I want to end, if I can, with a couple of bits of feedback that I've had. One from a parent and the other from a young person in care. So some parents do not want to work with Children's Services. Sometimes they're reluctant to engage with us. And then Children's Services received a letter from a parent, and I've got a couple of lines if I can, Madam Mayor. As a family consisting of a mother and son, we've had Children's Services intervention since before birth. Even when social workers tried to help me, I refused to engage. I was very suspicious of them, lied, and hid things from them. If I could give any advice to anyone going through the same struggles and dealing with Children's Services, I would say most of all, engage with services offered. My son has now been home for nearly 2 years. The letter was much longer and very complimentary. So my advice to families is let us support you, let us help you, and work with us. Madam Mayor, I had an email from a young person in care, and I'm just going to quickly read it. My social worker is really good, not judgmental, and really wants me to succeed. She focuses on my strengths. She's in a good position as a social worker to tell other people about these strengths too. She brings everyone together and tells them the positives instead of just focusing on the negatives. My social workers made me feel a lot less worried about my situation. She asks people things like, what are you doing and what can you do to help? Like mental health services. She's really nice and really does actually care. Madam Mayor, that feedback evidences the great work that our social workers are doing, and it shows that we can positively support children and young people in our care. I move the report as set out, Madam Mayor, and I'm happy to take questions one at a time, please.
Thank you very much indeed. First question is to Councillor Adam Picken, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Wilson, I'm sure we've all seen the news regarding child deaths, in particular the one close to us in Solihull, resulting in the tragic death of Arthur Labinjo Hughes. What reassurance can you give us as elected members that this will not happen to a Walsall child?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hickin. It would be a blatant lie if I stood here and said to any member here and any officer here that that could never happen in Walsall. And anybody that did say it could never happen would be lying. I think the only reassurance we can give is that our officers are working hard to make sure it doesn't happen. And we have a lot of checks and balances in place. The example you gave for Solihull, you may or may not be aware, there was a joint targeted area inspection and the report was published on the 21st of February. The report was shared with me by officers who are reflecting on the learning and recommendations from a Walsall perspective. And the report is being considered at the next MASH Management Board, which is attended by all of our key partners, including the Council, the Police, Education, Health, Mental Health and Probation. They're collectively reviewing the findings and reporting to the Safeguarding Partnership to offer assurance that the areas of concern identified in the JTI report are fully addressed here in Walsall, set out any areas that need further consideration or action. This work will be overseen by the MASH Management Group and the Safeguarding Partnership. Having recently had a successful Ofsted inspection, which included consideration into the MASH, I'm confident that our current arrangements are sufficiently robust. Whilst we always strive to do better, this is done in conjunction with partners with strong oversight and direction of the MASH management. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hicken.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor, I'm not sure whether you noticed on a national basis that a report came forward that in disadvantaged families, a number of the children are not getting enough sleep and were so arriving at school very tired, because the reason they hadn't got any sleep because they haven't got a bed. And I would hope that perhaps that you could publicise the fact that such help to buy a bed for these children could come out of money home jobs for this crisis fund we're all talking about. But would you actually publicise the fact that that sort of service is available? Because I'm not sure how many people, how many families it affects in Walsall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Mayor, any families that we're working with and any of our teams are working with will identify or should identify any needs that the family will have and then report into the council and to other services and other directorates to gain that support. So, yes, I think we do promote it because our teams are identifying things on a... Thank you for the question, Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Bell Chatty.
Councillor Murphy, I've moved places. Thank you. Thank you for your report, councillors. Can you just confirm how elected members of refer to any concerns they might have with children's services?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Murphy. So, sometimes elected members in particular will email me as the Cabinet Member for Children's Services and say, I have a concern about a child. Now, whilst I'm happy to receive those and forward them on, that's not the correct way of processing, because if it takes me 2 days to read the email, if I'm on holiday, if my phone doesn't work, if the battery's flat, and I don't pick up on that email, that child is potentially at harm. So the advice I would give, if it's urgent and there's a child at risk, it's a 999, call the police. The police clearly have emergency powers. If it's not that urgent, then you need to be emailed or contacted through the phone to the multi-agency safeguarding hub, the MASH, which I referred to earlier, which the details can be found on the website. The details can be found on your phones, your council phones. But I think it's important that we use the right process, because the longer it takes for us to start dealing with an issue, the more we're putting a young person at risk. So thank you for the question. Yes.
Councillor Lee Jevons.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's going to be more of a comment, actually. But last week I had the pleasure, again, of chairing Education Scrutiny. And we heard about the Walsall Right for Children transformation plan. Now, I want to go back a little bit for those who perhaps weren't here at the time when Walsall were inspected and we had an awful Ofsted, really awful Ofsted. And I remember our portfolio holder at the time was Councillor Cassidy, Barbara Cassidy, and she came back into a group meeting and she said that the government troubleshooter that had been sent in, Rose Collinson, came out with a comment that for children in Walsall, children's services, the outlook is... Barbara was almost in tears because she put her heart and soul, like a lot did that then. There's been a heck of a lot of work put in by staff, by councillors on the committees, because by and large on these committees, children's and education, politics tends to be left at the door. Not always, but most of the time, because children are put first. Under Conservative administrations, then ours, now back to you, work has continued, and I will pay a tribute to Councillor Wilson. Actually, you are absolutely heart and soul into that position. Thank you for what you put in. It's pleasing then. It's pleasing that we've got something good to report, isn't it, with regard to this service that was so poor not so long ago. And that the future of our town is now in better hands. As you say, there's always cases. You can never guarantee But as near as damn it now, we are where we should be, and we've come a very long way. And I just want to put on record from my group, I think, as Chair of Education Scrutiny, thanks to everyone who works in children's services and education. So often they overlap. And it's really a tribute to them and the efforts that have been put in. And I did say earlier on, I recognise the investment that still goes into children's education. So yeah, just general thanks for all the efforts that have been put in to staff. And it would be very remiss if I didn't say that.
Anything to answer?
Thank you, Madam. I want to come back. I mean, I remember Councillor Cassidy, and she was as passionate as I am about children's services. And I just wanted to say it's a proud thing in this council that children's services is non-political. There's no politics in children's services, so whether that's at scrutiny or at cabinet level, it's got nothing to do with politics. And we talk about this good Ofsted rating. Clearly, we want to improve that, and clearly, I'm pushing my teams. We want to be outstanding. But like I'm corrected by the Director of Children's Services, Sally Rose, says to me, the title's nice to be good or to be outstanding, but actually it's about the difference that we make. It's about the outcomes we deliver, and that's the important thing. But thank you for your comments, Councillor Jevons.
Got 2 minutes, Councillor Noaz.
I just wanted to add to that, and thank you for Tim for his openness when it comes to scrutiny committee, and also to the chair of scrutiny, where we able to look at these issues. One of the concerns, although it's not directly to do with children's services, CAM service and how that's provided, and it would be good for, and I'm sure you will give a commitment to work with us at scrutiny to try and improve that service, or influence it as much as we can, rather, to ensure the kids get the support they do. But as I have spoken, I'd like to also say thank you to Sally and her team who've taken us on this journey and focused very much on that. And again, agreeing with Lee and yourself about the positive nature in which we have for children. And I'm glad you said what you did in regards to, Mike said about the cost that it costs towards after a child. That's something that we've never actually thought of when we actually child who's been in difficulties. Because as a borough and across the whole chamber, it's always been this protect the child first, consider the money afterwards. So I'd like to do that. And if you could just talk about the CAM service. I had a question on transformation as well. I'll leave that for the next meeting.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I mean, mental health clearly in our young people is a big issue, and it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. So there's two things I'll say. The first one is clearly, and you know this, Councillor Noaz, CAMS is an external partner service. So yes, we can speak to them, but obviously we can't tell them what to do and we can't change the service. And do I think there's some work to do? Yes, I do. I'm happy to work with you on it. The other thing is we do have an internal mental health service, which is the Flash service, recently been reviewed, and that's something we can have influence on, and I welcome scrutiny's input. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Can I now move over to Councillor Statham to present his reports, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Walsall, its towns, districts and neighbourhoods have a proud past. To be certain of our future prosperity, we have to live in the present, seizing the here and now, opportunities to help Walsall and its residents be the best they can be. This portfolio report provides me with the opportunity to express my personal sincere thanks and gratitude to all staff since assuming responsibility for the internal services portfolio some 9 months ago. With excess of 3,000 employees, our staff are one of our richest assets. There is no doubt COVID-19 has been a catalyst to drive change in our working practices. Living in a digital age means people can work differently, but still deliver positive outcomes and should be actively encouraged to do so where appropriate. I would also wish to place on record and acknowledge the innovation, adaptability and flexibility they have collectively demonstrated over the past 2 most challenging of years, continuing to provide professional service delivery throughout the pandemic. Madam Mayor, it's been a long night full of statistics. It's not my intention to read the report verbatim, but assume members have already taken the opportunity to do so. However, I would like to update members on our key social values strategy, commonly referred to as our Buy Local or Walsall First. and the significant benefits I envisage this delivering to all Walsall taxpayers in keeping the Walsall pound within the Walsall economy. This administration defines this as a Walsall first approach, an opportunity to define what levelling up really means to the public. To myself and Cabinet colleagues, it's about levelling local. Levelling local is not just about creating the right economic circumstances for Walsall to flourish, but ensuring that as a council we play our part as a purveyor of quality services. Levelling local with businesses and sparking the opportunities for them to trade both with us and on our behalf. How social value fits into the Walsall model. Community wealth building is about creating a resilient and inclusive economy for all local people. This requires reducing the wealth flowing out of the local economy so it can be retained and recirculated for the benefit of all Walsall residents and businesses alike. The key element of this is by ensuring social value, being economic, social and environmental benefits that are at the core of delivery of public contracts and services. The case for such an approach is stronger than ever in the face of the devastating economic and public health consequences of COVID-19. And it is vital as a council that we contribute to the recovery and flourishing of an inclusive economy here in Walsall. Key to this is the council utilises its role as both an employer and a major purchaser of goods and services to increase its physical spend in the local economy and encourage other partners to do so. Increasing the spend from Walsall-based organisations and those in the wider West Midland region requires breaking down large contracts and simplifying the associated documentation to allow smaller businesses to compete. By supporting a wider number of Walsall businesses to compete for contracts, greater social value will be evident to all Walsall communities. The model relies on partnerships and the developing of collaboration with social value at its core. By improving the accessibility of contracts, this will lead to virtuous circles in the local economy, which make it more inclusive, competitive and prosperous. Going forward, we intend to roll out the procurement framework within the council to ensure procurement exercises consider wider benefits beyond the purely economic factors, such as local employment and training, community development, the environment and climate resilience. Ensuring that collectively we are building a resilient and inclusive economy for all Walsall residents will be at the heart of all service contracts. Thank you, Madam Mayor and elected members. Moving on to questions on the report, could I respectfully request we take them on a one-by-one basis? Thank you.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Councillor Staden, for your report. I want to ask you a question about equality. It's one of your headlines, sort of, in your portfolio, page 309. We have developed a workforce equality action plan which aims to attract, retain and develop our workforce all across underrepresented groups. I'd like to ask you, the top 3 team of the council, how you attracting applicants to these three core tiers of the council, because these are very underrepresented and it's quite evident from the top 3 there's not many BAME people employed in them positions, and I'd like your comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. In terms of representation within the council, I would just like to give the commitment that the council recruits on the basis of merit, skills and talent. We are an equal opportunities employer where we guarantee equality of opportunity. Equality of outcome is a far more difficult thing to do. Without positive discrimination, you will not get equality of outcome.
Councillor Hussain, I've got Councillor Aftab-Nawaz.
Councillor Jevons is before me. Sorry, just to push that point. I haven't spoken.
You haven't spoken yet.
Just carrying on that point from Councillor Hussain, and thank you for your answer Councillor Staven. Can you give us a bit more details about when we will be representative of the communities that we live in those three top tiers? Because I understand what you're saying, and I accept that we do look for meritocracy and look for merit. But in fact, it's been many, many years. And from our point of view, my question is, when do we expect to look like the borough that we serve?
Thanks, Councillor Nawaz. It would be inappropriate to actually start setting timescales with regard to that. As I reiterate, it is on meritocracy and on skills and talent. However, there is, as I'm aware, an overview and scrutiny committee working group set up to look at this specific issue. I look forward to any recommendations that may come from that committee.
Councillor Josh Whitehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for the detailed report. It covers a wide range of activities. What would you say is your priority for the next financial year?
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Priorities must be ensuring the Walsall pound remains within the Walsall economy by utilising council spend, increasing the percentage that local business take up, offering value for money to Walsall residents, taxpayers.
Finally, Councillor Jevons.
Thank you. It's quite a short question, really. You go on to talk about under Section 8 a building conditions survey, which is a huge piece of work that we talked about in administration, and you're continuing on. So where are we with this? And is there sort of a projected timescale of how long this is going to take?
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. As you point out, it is a large piece of work. It is ongoing. I will write to you and tell you where we are within that process and give an anticipated timescale. It would be wrong to guess one and not have a definitive answer. So thank you.
No further members who wish to ask questions. Can I thank Councillor Statham and Councillor Wilson for their reports? And can I move on to item 14, which is notice of motion, submitted by Councillor Nawaz and Councillor Hussain. So Councillor Nawaz, to move your motion, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the notice of motion as set out. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This notice of motion sets out a view for this council about this unfair tax. The national insurance rise will disproportionately impact the most poorest working poor. It will raise money, yes, but the burden will be, in my view, unfair. Now, this notice of motion is asking for the council to show support in regards to being against the national insurance rise. There's many people cross-party, as you know, in Parliament, who have said that this isn't the best way to raise money. There's fairer ways to raise, particularly if it was income tax or if it was a wealth tax. And I know that's a bit difficult for Conservatives about wealth taxes. But taking that point aside, there is a better way of raising this money. And what we're asking today is for the council to come together and just say openly to the government that we don't think raising national insurance across the board for everyone is the right thing to do or the right way to raise the money. We do need the money and it needs to be raised, but this isn't the best way to raise the money. So that notice of motion on that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's seconded. Councillor Hussain. You wish to speak?
Yeah.
Carry on then.
Yeah, thank you. Just with your permission, Madam Mayor. Yeah, in second this, I'd like to say this, obviously we're asking the Exchequer, the Chancellor, to move this very unfair sort of national insurance. And what's happening now with the cost of living crisis, we've got so much burden on people, and it's going to hit the most vulnerable people, working families, people on tax credits, people with children. So all these motions are asking to the Chancellor, and it's writing a letter to show our position as a local authority, elected members, that they should reconsider this. People are already burdened with a lot of problems. And we talked about in the budget of the cost of living crisis, food poverty, the bills are rising, fuel prices are rising. This is going to be another hit on working class people, on families and vulnerable people. So we should support this today and send a message to the government and especially the Chancellor. There's cross-party support here in Parliament. This has been debated and most of the Member of Parliament oppose this, but unfortunately, it's a numbers game again. So the government got this through, but we should show unity here and send a strong message to the Chancellor that we're not happy with this decision and we should reconsider.
Councillor Mike Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, when you're sitting here, sometimes, you know, you rely upon others to help you out, and fortunately, they jog my memory, and I'm very pleased about that. I refer back to the budget on the 17th of April 2002 by the very erstwhile Mr. Gordon Brown, who was then the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I've just been reading in Hansard, actually, and it does actually say he put a 1% increase on national insurance to fund the National Health Service. Looks like we've learned something from you, which I know is a rarity. But at the end of the day, his comments were that we should always make sure that the British have health service free at the point of use. Well, you know, quite honestly, you can't have it both ways. You've got the Labour government in 2002, and that's a long time ago, and you weren't here. But, you know, you have to look back historically and see what others have done. And he, although he ruined the country going on, in my view, sold our gold for nothing. The fact of the matter is this has been used by Parliament in the past, and this is no difference whatsoever. So I would say this, yes, there is no doubt. We hear again the crocodile tears from your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who says, you know, we've got to fund the NHS. The NHS has just gone through the most turbulent point in time they've ever had. They've come out the other side, and we should be proud of that. I'm very proud that some of my members actually work in the NHS. And as a result, they've seen it firsthand. And many of the people out there would welcome that money being put back into the NHS, providing it's ring-fenced to do so. But obviously, we don't have any control over that. So therefore, I would say, no, we will not be supporting your notice of motion for the reasons I've just said. You know, you can't have it both ways. The Labour government in 2002 think this is a good idea. We'll increase it by 1%. He was on his feet for 57 minutes. I don't know whether he said a lot, but I've been just reading it now and he didn't seem to get around to much, except he says this 1% is designated for the NHS. Hansard doesn't lie. Politicians sometimes do, certain those down in Westminster. But at the end of the day, what we do have is a precedent that's been set. And as a result, I don't have any hesitation in saying, if you ask the man or woman in the street, would you pay an extra, whatever it might be, I've got the figure somewhere. Thank you very much, Peter. You're very kind. At the end of the day, if you stop any man or woman or child in the street and say, would you contribute X amount of money out of your salary or pay to fund the NHS and make sure that you've got free use at the point of entry, I think I'd say, without any shadow of a doubt, you wouldn't have anybody wavering to say, yes, that's money well invested. So no, we won't be supporting your amendment, your notice of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Ken Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just amazed, to be honest, that we're discussing something else with a notice of motion that we have very little control. We can write to the government about this, that and the other, but why can't some notice of motions come by that we can actually do something about rather than we write to the government? I'm just amazed. Thank you.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, did you call me? Shall I? Am I on the right to reply?
No, we're still discussing the motion before us, as far as I'm aware. Yes? Yes, I do. I intended to be last. Thank you. Because of the timing, Councillor Nowes, you've got the last voice before the response from the member. See? Okay? Or you can have the last voice as the. There's Councillor Nowes, can you? Oh, thank no.
Am I on?
You have a right to respond.
Madam
Before we
Mayor.
go to the vote. You moved it.
Madam Mayor, she's trying to block me out again. She does it every time. As I said, Vladimir Putin would be proud of.
Colleagues, the reason I've said that is because it's verging on to 9 o'clock. So therefore, if I could ask Councillor Nowes to respond, then we'll go to the vote and we'll be in time to finish on time.
So
To the 3-hour stretch, and it would be my sad duty to ask you to suspend the standing orders to enable the agenda to be completed.
Carry on.
I'm doing the right to respond. So, Madam Mayor, today we've seen whose side who is on. And
Hold on. Sit down, Councillor Smith. Please sit down, Councillor. Tony, can you? There's no need for this behaviour. Sit down. There's no need.
Councillor Smith, I don't think that's a valid point of order. The Mayor is entitled, as I've said before, to control the debate. If she thinks there is a sufficiency of debate, she can call the speakers she wishes to call. She's clearly said that she would like Councillor Nawaz to begin his right of reply and then move to the vote, and that is entirely within the Mayor's discretion. Councillor Bird has purely moved a procedural motion in case the meeting actually extends to above the allotted 3 hours. So that is perfectly permissible. This doesn't stop the matter being debated, and the Mayor has made a ruling in relation to Councillor Nawaz delivering his right to reply, then moving to the vote. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Smith. So, Madam Mayor, Councillor Bird talks about the funding for the NHS. We're not saying that the funding shouldn't be for the NHS. What we're saying that raising national insurance isn't the best way to do it at a time where people. Say again.
Gordon Brown did in 2002. It was
But
a
that's not what we're
1%
saying.
increase in national insurance.
You may have noticed I'm not Gordon Brown. What we're saying is that the national insurance increase isn't the best way to raise the money for the NHS at this time. Whatever happened to 2002, did you say? Yeah. I think I was just, I'm off a job then, but many years ago. But the best way to raise it isn't to disproportionately affect the working poor. The best way to raise it is to look at other methods like the wealth tax and looking at income tax as well. The fact of the matter is that there's many people in the Conservative Party at a national level who have taken that on board and have also lobbied the Chancellor. What we're doing today was just to simply ask the Chancellor that this borough thinks that the national insurance increase is unfair and disproportionately affects the working poor and therefore should be reconsidered. The wealth tax would be more appropriate, or income tax would be more appropriate. But rather than dragging this on, shall we just move to the vote? Because I know everybody's tired. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We now take the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? The motion is lost. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the business of tonight's meeting. I thank you for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.